feeling you had. You did not record what you saw and experienced. You recorded a feeling. It felt so amazing that the feeling was coded in the memory as well. And therefore, you were the co-author of that trick. You helped me fool you.
I'm very curious about the role of emotion in the co-authoring of these tricks. And by the way, folks, the conversation we're having today is not just about magic tricks and mentalists. This occurs at the level of interactions between people, one-to-one. This occurs at the level of media to the general audience of the world. This stuff scales at every level and in every domain of life. We'll get to how that occurs. I wonder if I could ask you about the reverse engineering of a trick, a hypothetical trick.
Sure.
So tell me if this trick is possible, and if so, one of the possible ways that you would do this. I think I've seen you do something similar to this, or other mentalists do something similar to this. You're standing in a room full of people, let's say 50 people, and you have a piece of paper and a pen, and you say, okay, I'm gonna write down a series of numbers. And you write them down, you fold it up, you put it on a table next to you, you set the pen down, there's no contact with it anymore. And then you go around the room and you just ask people for numbers between 1 and 25. You ask a certain number of people, and then somehow you return to the paper, you open it up, and that's the sequence of numbers. It seems like a straightforward but astonishing trick.
It's a classic.
A classic. Okay.
Classic of magic.
For people like me, we want to know at least one solution to that challenge. What's one way in which a magician could do that? Obviously, we start to go to the physical explanation. Okay, somebody underneath the table that the piece of paper was on wrote down the numbers they heard and put it on the table. Another solution would be that there was a stack of papers up there with any number of different combinations, but then it's a very large big stack of paper, then it becomes hard to hide, and on and on. All going in the wrong direction, of course. I can also think of the end product way of doing this, where the piece of paper that you show has the numbers that the people stated, but somehow we think it's those numbers when it's actually other numbers, like there's some sort of visual illusion that we all agree on seeing. But here I'm just guessing. So how could one do that trick?
Wow, we need 2 hours to dissect this one. So here's the deal. I just noticed something as you were going through all the options. As someone, I assume you're not a magician.
No.
I just realized that a quality of magic is that it ignites your imagination and your creativity. You just basically saw something that has no explanation, and you're a knowledgeable guy. You know a lot about a lot of things, and it, in a good way, it bothers you. Why don't I know that answer? I know so much about the mind and how we sleep and how we, how certain exercises affect our bodies and blah, blah, blah. But this series of number, I don't know. And that drives you nuts a bit. But it's good, because then your mind starts racing. And thinking of everything you said is a wonderful exercise in problem solving, right? How could be achieved? And then you slowly rule them out as too much paper, too much work, hiring somebody under a table to write maybe a solution, but you have to pay somebody just to do that job. But it's nice because we're teasing the mind. We're challenging the mind in an era where it seems like all the information is out there. My smartphone can do, more than my first computer could, right? In my pocket. So we are up against, and by every time I tell you this, it's a bit of a tangent here. Every time technology advances, magicians get scared. Say, people when they can do all these marvelous things, how are they going to care about the number you spoke or card changing in my hand? And I attribute that to, again, your desire to see something marvelous. By the way, there are people that don't want to see magic. Like I do something that really seems impossible, and they go, sleight of hand. They come up with a very simple solution. They're not nitpicking about exactly how you did it. They go, he's fast with his hands. Or, they come up with a very simple solution. That does, I don't know why it satisfies them, but it does. And it's because they lack the desire to see magic. So to me, again, and we're going back to the co-authoring, I really need someone, a partner, whenever I do magic, that someone who has this desire to see something that's beautiful, that's going to bend the rules of what we know is possible, right? And they're joining me. So to your question, how is it done? There's many ways to achieve this effect. And because we don't possess, we can talk about this if you want, about the supernatural. I don't believe that anybody possesses supernatural powers or even close to that. And because of that, we have to cheat. We have to do some dirty work, which I don't want you to know about. And so in other words, every trick that I do has a little scar, a moment I wish did not exist. And by the way, a magician, when they choose a trick like that, they need to say, I can go this route or this route. They're going to pay a price. With this version, I cannot do it this way. Here, it's not as clean. Here, I cannot be as direct. Here, I have to choose maybe certain people in the audience. Again, I'm tiptoeing around it so I don't reveal how it's done. But you're making a sacrifice with every choice you make. The goal is at the end to make somebody as smart as you go, how? And then start racing, and at the end, you reach a dead end, hopefully. It's magic. You excel, and I enjoyed it. And that's, I want you to surrender. And it's a good surrender. It's not, you're not being defeated. You give into to this place where magic could happen. You make room for something that should not happen in this world to happen. And that's why I love magic so much. It is a bit of a reminder that, I'll tell you a story. There is a juggler who is not a magician. He's and I'm not going to mention names for a reason. So he juggles on the streets and, makes some money on the streets. And one day he goes to see a magic show. And the magician, a wonderful magician, who does this wonderful act. It's the zip code act. He says to people, tell me your zip code. And then he tells them where they live. Tell me where you live. He tells them the zip code. And then he describes places around them. Oh, yeah, you have a Starbucks there and blah, blah. And he describes, it's amazing. It's wonderful. Now, this juggler, not a magician, watches a magician who is doing a trick. There's a scientific explanation to how it's done. It's not anything beyond that. And again, it's wonderful. And he goes, how did he do that? And then he comes up with the solution that the magician must have memorized all the zip codes in the world. Not the case, but that's the impression. He goes home and starts memorizing all the zip codes in America first. He spends thousands of hours to memorize zip codes for real. He's doing the real version of what the magician did. And he performs it now. All over the country, he's doing the zip code act for real. And the beauty of this story is that a false performance, artificial representation of a skill, inspired somebody to do something that is real and therefore push his limits, his human, realistic limits, to a level that a lot of people go, that's not possible, right? And I think it's a beauty about this, and again, goes back to your question, how is it done? So maybe the solution you just came up with is better than what I do, but I at least ignited you to think about it. So it's really a big reason, an important reason why I love magic so much.
Staying with my question of how a trick like that is done.
You really want to know?
Well, I don't think you're actually going to tell me the specific order of operations to make it happen. I don't expect that, but I can think of two kind of endpoints for exploring this. One is, or at least two. One is to manipulate what's on the paper, right? Like The other is to manipulate what people say or are likely to say, perhaps by selecting people that are likely to say certain numbers because you have some understanding of that. I don't know how that would happen. The other is to completely revise people's understanding of what just happened in a group. And I think the last possibility is the one that intrigues me and most people the most. The idea that even in the company of other rational, well-rested, sober, meaning non-inebriated or on drugs people, that
sometimes it helps.
That there could be a collective perception that is not accurate, but everyone agrees to confabulate together. And the reason I ask this, and I focus on this third possibility, is that we know that the memory system is a confabulation system.
Correct.
A good example of this would be people who sadly have some form of dementia. They often will find themselves in a room doing something, and if you ask them, hey, what were you doing? They don't say, I don't know. They say, oh, I came in here to do something. And they create these elaborate stories of what got them there, which may make sense to them, may not. But we all do this. We all confabulate. False memories is a huge topic into itself, but we all confabulate. Memory is not perfect. So I imagine this third possibility is one that you work with and that you massage. How does one think about memory in the context of these experiments that I just called them experiments, these tricks that you do?
By the way, I love that word.
Right, and here we agreed that we were going to talk about science today, as we always do whenever I see you. And in experiments, as people may or may not know, you ask a question, but you pose hypotheses. So you say, like, how do we cure cancer? But then you pose a hypothesis. You say, I think it's going to be cured by doing blank, blank, and blank. And then you test that and you try and rule out your hypothesis. So it's a little bit of why I call it an experiment. So, for instance, is there a way that you can get people to believe that they saw the numbers, let's make it very simple, 3, 8, and 7, when in fact you held up a piece of paper that said something very different? Have you done that before?
I see where you're going with this. And I love that you use the word experiments. One of my heroes, Chan Canasta, was a psychologist who used psychology in his work as a magician, as a mentalist. And he never called his pieces tricks or magic. He called them experiments. And he was careful about it. It's not just an aesthetic choice. He wanted to plant this seed in their mind. Experiment means it could fail. Okay? Which is a very, very good starting point for any dramatic, because if something is going to work, but if there's something at stake, something could fail, people are more engaged. So I love the word. I sometimes use the word, what's an experiment?
Yeah, it's like these crazy people that climb up the side of buildings with no ropes. I mean, we don't want to see them fall, but the possibility that they could fall is what's exciting. The movie Free Solo with Alex Honnold, we all know at the beginning he lives. He lives, and yet you want to see it in case he might not live. And even though you know he lives, in some ways that's a magic trick into itself.
That's the brilliance of David Blaine, who I consider one of my dearest friends and one of my favorite magicians in the world. And what he does, I mean, we can talk about him at length, but blending real stuff with magic, and sometimes it's hard to tell what is real and what's not. And I even love that aspect. And a lot of people don't know, but all the stuff he does is real. When he's holding his breath night after night now in Vegas at the Wynn, 10 minutes. And, sitting in the audience watching David do that is so inspiring.